protect anyone. Family, Jesse, myself.
Then my name never comes up with those guys, does it?
Just watch me move and fall away. Nobody even knows my name, and no one suspects that I'm not fine, and nobody outs behavioral Frankenstein.
It's showtime, folks.
There is a version of Jimmy McGill that desperately wanted to be loved. Not admired, not feared, not even respected in a traditional sense, but loved. The tragedy of his character across Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad is that he spent his entire life confusing those things, performing versions of himself that he believes will finally earn him connection, only to end up more isolated each time. By the time he fully becomes Saul Goodman, the persona isn't just a mask, it's a barrier. It keeps people laughing, distracted, impressed, or intimidated, but never close. And the most devastating part is that Jimmy doesn't just lose people, he actively participates in the destruction of every relationship that could save him from himself. But before we get into the more important characters in Jimmy's life that turned him into the man he ultimately became, we need to talk about who came first. And that is his relationship with Walter White and Jesse Pinkman. With Walter, Jimmy finds himself in a position that mirrors his relationship with his brother Chuck McGill, who I will get into in just a bit. But with a crucial difference. Walter doesn't disguise his contempt, he uses Jimmy, threatens him, and consistently asserts dominance over him. Jimmy, despite his outward confidence, is clearly intimidated by Walter, yet he continues to work with him. Not out of loyalty, but out of necessity, and perhaps a misguided belief that proximity to power equates to security. Jesse's relationship with Jimmy is less hostile, but equally distant. Jesse does not trust him, and Jimmy does little to earn that trust beyond fulfilling his role as a lawyer. There are moments where Jimmy shows concern or attempts to guide Jesse, but these are overshadowed by the broader context in which he operates. To both Walter and Jesse, Jimmy is a facilitator, a means to an end. When their operation collapses, they do not consider Jimmy's fate, because he was never part of the inner circle. He was useful until he wasn't. Which leads us to his other dynamic, with Mike Ehrmantraut and Gustavo Fring. Mike and Gustavo are defined by their absence in emotional depth. These are not friendships, they are professional alignments. Mike, in particular, recognizes Jimmy's capabilities and occasionally shows a degree of respect, but he never allows the relationship to become personal. This boundary is intentional. Mike operates within a strict moral framework, however flawed, and understands that Jimmy does not. There is an implicit acknowledgement that getting too close to Jimmy would be dangerous. Not physically, but morally. Gus, on the other hand, represents the extreme end of transactional relationship. For Gus, people are assets or liability, and Jimmy is firmly in a former category. There is no illusion of connection here, and in a way, this makes their dynamic more honest than Jimmy's other relationship. Gus never pretends to care, and therefore never betrays Jimmy in an emotional sense. However, this also means that Jimmy is surrounded by people who have no investment in him as a person. He exists in a world where his value is entirely conditional, reinforcing the idea that connection is something to be leveraged rather than experienced. This pattern continues in his interaction with Howard Hamlin, though in a more indirect, tragic way. Howard represents something Jimmy cannot tolerate, a version of success that appears effortless and legitimate. For much of the series, Jimmy projects his resentment onto Howard, believing him to be the primary obstacle in his career. When it is revealed that Chuck was the true source of that obstruction, Jimmy does not fully recalibrate his anger. Instead, Howard becomes a convenient outlet for unresolved frustration and grief. The campaign Jimmy and Kim, who we will also get into in just a minute, orchestrated against Howard is not driven by necessity. It is not about survival or even ambition. It is, at its core, an emotional reaction, an attempt to exert control, to rewrite a narrative in which Jimmy was once powerless. But the consequences are irreversible. Spoiler alert, but Howard's death, sudden and senseless, is one of the clearest examples of how Jimmy's actions ripple outwards in a way he cannot control. Howard is not someone who refused to care about Jimmy. He is someone Jimmy refused to understand. In destroying Howard, Jimmy eliminates another potential bridge to a healthier life, further isolating himself. But need we forget that at the center of this loneliness is his relationship with his brother, Chuck McGill. Chuck is not merely a disapproving sibling, he is the foundational wound in Jimmy's psyche. Jimmy's transformation into a lawyer is, in many ways, an act of devotion to Chuck. He wants to prove that he can change, that he can be worthy of the same profession, the same legitimacy. But Chuck's rejection is absolute and ideological. He does not believe that people like Jimmy can change, and more importantly, he does not want him to. Chuck sees Jimmy's charisma not as a gift, but as a weapon, a tool for manipulation that will inevitably hurt people. What makes this dynamic so painful is that Chuck is not entirely wrong. As crazy as he may be, his refusal to acknowledge Jimmy's effort ensures that Jimmy becomes exactly what Chuck feared. And Jimmy's attempt to care for Chuck, bringing him groceries, managing his condition, sacrificing his own time and dignity, are genuine acts of love. They are not schemes, they are not transactional, but Chuck interprets them through a lens of suspicion and eventually weaponizes that love against Jimmy. The revelation that Chuck was the one blocking his career is not just a betrayal, it is a confirmation of Jimmy's deepest fear, that no matter what he does, he will never be seen as legitimate by the people who matter most to him. After Chuck's death, Jimmy's emotional response is not grief in a traditional sense, it is avoid. He refuses to process it because doing so would require him to confront the fact that his life's central relationship ended in rejection. Saul Goodman is born in that vacuum, not as an evolution, but as an escape. If Chuck was the origin of Jimmy's loneliness, Kim Wexler is its most profound contradiction. Kim is the only person who truly sees Jimmy, not his potential, but his flaws, and chooses to stay anyways. The relationship is built on mutual understanding. Unlike every other connection in Jimmy's life, Kim is not impressed by Saul Goodman. She is drawn to Jimmy McGill. This is crucial because it means Jimmy has, for perhaps the only time in his life, a relationship that is not dependent on performance. However, this is also where the tragedy deepens. Jimmy does not know how to sustain a relationship that is not rooted in performance or manipulation. His instinct, shaped by years of rejection and survival, lead him to turn even his bond with Kim into some kind of game. Their shared cons start as a moment of connection, playful, intimate, almost romantic, but gradually escalate into something destructive. The line between bonding and self-sabotage disappears. Kim, unlike Jimmy, eventually recognizes this. She understands that their love is real, but also that it is corrosive. Her decision to leave is not a rejection of Jimmy as a person, it is a rejection of the version of themselves they could become together. For Jimmy, however, the nuance is lost. Kim leaving reinforces the same narrative Chuck instilled in him, that he is inherently damaging to the people he loves. But instead of confronting that idea, he leans into it. If he's going to hurt people anyway, he might as well fully become Saul Goodman. Kim's departure is not just the loss of a partner, it is also the loss of the last person who believed Jimmy McGill was worth saving. After her, there is no one left to pull him back. All of this culminates into the persona of Gene Tekovic, the final stage of Jimmy's transformation. In this phase, the loneliness that has been building throughout his life becomes unavoidable. There is no audience for Saul Goodman, no clients to impress, no partners to scheme with. There is only routine, paranoia, and silence. Gene's existence is stripped of everything that once defined Jimmy's identity, revealing the emptiness beneath it. His decision to return to scamming is not driven by greed, but by desperation. It is an attempt to feel something, to reconnect with a version of himself while destructive, at least felt alive. What makes Jimmy's story so compelling is that his loneliness is not imposed on him by circumstances alone. It is the result of a continuous cycle of rejection and self-sabotage. He is hurt by others, particularly Chuck, but he also internalizes that hurt in a way that shapes his behavior. He expects rejection, and so he acts in a way that guarantees it. He fears being unloved, and so he becomes someone who is difficult to love. Each relationship in his life reflects this pattern, reinforcing the very isolation he is trying to escape. Kim's role in this narrative is crucial because she represents the one genuine opportunity Jimmy had to break that cycle. She loved him not for what he could do, but for who he was. And yet, even that was not enough. Not because Kim failed, but because Jimmy could not fully accept it. He could not trust that love could exist without conditions, without performance. And so, whether consciously or not, he contributed to its collapse. In the end, Saul Goodman is not just a lonely man because people leave him. He is lonely because he never learned how to let people truly stay. His life is a series of near misses, relationships that almost work, connections that almost became meaningful, moments where he almost chose a different path. But almost is not enough. By the time he was forced to confront the consequences of his action, the damage is done. And that is what makes his story so devastating. It is not the fall of a good man into villainy, or even the rise of a criminal mastermind. It is the story of someone who wanted to be loved, was given chances to be loved, but ultimately could not hold on to it.